Good day, everyone. It's Harlan Hutson from Chargebacks 911. I'm very, very happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation today. We have my friend and an travel industry expert in payments joining us, Paul Van Alfen. Say hello, Paul.
Hello, Harlan. Nice to be on board.
Yeah, we're gonna delve into a few topics around the sort of broad spectrum of post-pandemic travel payments, and it's going to be, I think, a very interesting conversation. But Paul, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell our listeners what you do, how you do it, and your background and past experience, because you have a vast amount of experience in the arena of payments in the travel industry.
Well, we only have 40 minutes, right? So I'll keep it short.
That's right.
Yeah, well, so Paul Van Alfen, I'm an independent travel payments consultant, basically working all the way up and down the travel payment value chain, from IATA to schemes, acquirers, payment gateways, payment orchestration providers, issuer, fraud companies, anyone that wants to customize their offering towards the travel industry, but also on the other side of the coin, working with airlines and OTAs to help them with their payment strategy, mainly working, impact of the pandemic, obviously, but also regulations, best practices, legislation, anything that's specific to the travel industry. And obviously, there's a lot of things that are specific around payments in travel. So that's where I'm actively involved in with a couple of peers from the industry. We're trying to help the ecosystem make it to the next level.
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's fantastic. And I know that your experience, the experience you bring, is going to help us sort of uncover the good, the bad, and the ugly about the evolution of payments in this post-pandemic world. So that's really what we're discussing today. We're going to be talking about a few things, consumer behavior, how that's changed, how that behavior has informed alternative payment methods, how the regions of the world, and we won't get to all this because there's just tons of content we could talk about here, how the regions of the world really have different approaches to paying. The consumers have different approaches to paying. And there are two final topics. One is industry innovation. So travel industry innovation, there's been really pre-pandemic, there was a lot of that happening, but how has that transformed these approaches? How has the pandemic transformed these approaches? And then finally, how is it that some of the industry players who previously were not in payments suddenly are in payments? So I'm excited to get going, but let's start with consumer behavior. So first of all, Paul, the pandemic brought a complete sea change to this idea of how do I get something I need. So I can't go to the store, maybe, right? I can't get out of my house. And so now I need to find a way to buy supplies to survive, right? And so that changed behaviors. What happened? What happened with payments with this pandemic?
Yeah, that's a very good observation. I think, Harlan, that I think you can speak about like an acceleration of digital transformation, if you can combine the two words, and where I think consumers really at the core things they were doing, like the primary needs, like eating, sleeping, etc. And all of a sudden, you couldn't walk into a supermarket, or you couldn't go out for dining, or so I think what happened is that those people that were not yet accustomed to using an app to order a pizza and to have it home delivered and at the front door, and then have a complete contactless experience, and having a hand delivered and the payment is already done in the app. I think that was for definitely certain parts of let's say the demographics, the older generation, was probably not yet as business as usual as it was for the younger generation. And I think that it was really accelerated and by the way, because people had to do it like that, right? And I think that's probably it initiated a lot of things that accelerated a lot of things, and all of a sudden, I think there's no way back. I mean, I had discussions recently around abandoning cash and moving into digital payments, paying with your phone or with a card and contactless. And one of the arguments was like, once this is all behind us, then people will go back to cash. Well, I personally don't think so. But
I don't think so either. I agree with that 100%. In fact, somebody paid me for a meal that I was my wife and I went to dinner with some friends, and they paid me a lot of cash, right? I don't know what to do with it, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm just sort of kidding, but it's like there's a certain amount of, boy, do I really want to touch this cash, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm not like that, but I know that a lot of people have questions about that. So when we talk about going contactless, right, we're talking about using a mobile phone, for example. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I went to a restaurant and I didn't give them my credit card. I just scanned it on my phone and a payment app came up and I did the tip and everything on my phone. That is now driving a lot of the innovations in payments, right? This idea that we don't have to pull out our credit card. What are the good things about that? What are the good things about that? And then talk to me about how that's impacting the travel industry. Because really, when we talk about mobile payments, contactless, we talk about shopping on the internet. There's no travel agent involved. We don't go down to the local travel agent, and that was changing anyway pre-pandemic. But what does that mean for the travel industry in general?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that channel shift was already underway since the early 2000s, of course. But what I hear from regions, like for instance in the Middle East, where it was still very common, to book your flight, the local, hole in the wall travel agency, if you like. That also there, because people had to abandon that and they had to shop groceries online, stuff like that. That they also have now made the shift towards booking online and paying online. And I think that's definitely, that will further continue. I think another aspect is what we've seen is that, for instance, if you look at the whole journey, if you like, and all the touch points that you would normally have, that you already booked online, you checked in online, you bought your ancillaries online, you paid for them online, but now also at the airport, checking in, well, maybe now with here in Europe, at least, with having to check your status of your vaccinations. You show your app and your QR code is scanned, and the kiosks are basically made in this like 12-15 month period that we've had now behind us. They were made contactless, so that you could just with your phone you could identify yourself and you could check in, you could drop a bag, you could pay for it. So I think that was already underway, but from a nice have, it became a must have.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the experience? Let's talk airlines for just a second. What about the experience of getting on an airline? So I used to fly to London, right? I won't tell you who it was, but I would if I wanted to buy some alcohol, because I didn't go in first class, I didn't feel like that was the right way to go. So I'm going to buy my alcohol now, right? I'm going to buy a glass of wine or whatever. The cart comes by, or I call for the flight attendant, and I give them my card. Right? Has that changed? Right? We're kind of in the era of things are still evolving, I would say, but do we see change in that respect? Right? Where is there a contactless method that's evolving for these in-flight services as well?
Yeah, I think that there was already a transition underway from accepting cash in flight to abandoning that and to move to card only or to mobile wallet only. You can still see contactless technology on board, which actually works either offline or online with the Wi-Fi on board. So that was already a major step forward. I think what happened since, and I haven't flown in 15 months, so I just from what I've read, is that that the in-flight entertainment or the in-flight equipment is now basically being leveraged to have like a menu in the back of your seat in front of you and connect to your phone and actually order from your seat on demand, basically. So someone comes actually and deliver it, whatever you've ordered. So it's not like you're wait for the trolley to come by, but you just order it and they bring it to you. And either you keep your tab open and you pay at the end, or you pay actually with your phone directly in flight. So yes, there's definitely, I think, there as well. And by the way, it is very difficult to retrofit planes with new technology, so it won't happen overnight. But there's definitely also an acceleration going on in that area as well.
Right. So absolutely, that's correct. And let's just cover the risks for just a second. The more online, mobile, contactless payments that exist, right? And in my role as doing strategic partnerships and working with the merchant side or the airline side, in this case, travel providers, the risk is that these card not present transactions are going to turn into chargebacks. Somebody's not going to recognize, right, that they bought this meal or whatever it was on the airline, or they're not going to recognize some other aspect of this transaction, right? And now the chargeback is going to happen. And so the risks pile up as we go more and more, I would call it remote from the experience at the airport, right? Where you're not paying for the ticket at the airport. You're not paying for anything. You're not encountering any person to pay for this thing. So it feels to me like there's less accountability in that. Do you agree with that? That people are they learning to charge back more? Are they, questioning things more now that they're going online, going mobile with it?
I think there are a couple of viewpoints, a couple of angles there. I think the last part of that is when you use your mobile device, it's an EMV transaction, so it is authenticated. So it was you. I mean, it's your device. It's your your face scan or your fingerprint. So I think that's where you say, hey, you can charge back it, but no, you did it. That's I think one thing. And sorry, what was the other one?
Just the idea that they're more likely to feel at ease, sort of disputing a charge when they do it remotely.
Yeah, that's one. I think, of course, one of the probably the most heavily impacting thing. The pandemic was, of course, that the flights were canceled and that customers had to apply for a refund, had to wait, or in the end decided that they didn't want it anymore, or they wanted to receive their funds back, and they reversed the payment. They charged it back. So I think I don't know. Maybe if you've seen that for a lot of people that might have been the first time that they actually have actively reversed it, and that they now see option. Oh, it works like this. I can do it also in other circumstances. It also means that I think that using a card, and we'll come to alternative forms of payment later, but I think the fact in today's day and age, with the pandemic now mostly behind us, but still actively there, is that you need, as a customer, you need protection that if something goes wrong, if the flight's canceled, if in the worst case scenario the supplier stops operating completely, that at least you have the certainty that you can go back to your issuer and can get your money back, and you're not out of pocket of it. So I think that's also an aspect that it might work both sides. It helps give confidence in the use of cards overall, but it also probably makes people aware of it, and they might also try it out in other areas as well. So I'm not sure if you've seen any cases of that.
That we've seen a lot of that, and I think that part of the way that consumer behavior in travel has changed in this way is that once the shutdown came to the travel industry, really the world, not just the travel industry. Once the shutdown came, there was obviously there were millions of reservations, every day, really, that were all of a sudden going to do one of a couple of things, right? They were either going to be refunded, right, which the airlines didn't want, because all of a sudden their cash flow dries up. Now everybody wants a refund. So what do? They offer vouchers, right? And there was this entire, almost like a tsunami of problems that existed. So and this ties in with consumer behavior. Once the consumers knew that they weren't going to get a refund, or that let's just say that the airlines were resistant, understandably, they had to go to their bank. And so many people who didn't know that they could file a dispute all of a sudden filed a dispute. And that created this sort of, I would call it a critical mass of cash siphoning from the airlines, right? And so there's a protection there, as to your point, but there also ended up being a lot of residual problems. What do you see about that? So the airline industry and the consumers now come to this point where the behavior is matching up with the problem. I can't go on my trip, so I want a refund. They issue me a voucher, so I go to my bank, blah, blah, blah. What kind of a tidal wave effect did that have for the industry?
Well, I think if we now look back at last summer season in the Northern Hemisphere, that was all new. It was basically, uncharted territory, if you like. I think what happened quite quickly after that is that to make it possible for customers to return, to grow their confidence, at least to make a booking and to reduce at least the perception that they would have to wait very long for the refund or don't get their money back completely. The airlines already quite quickly started to make the terms and conditions much more flexible, right? And they made at least more concrete promises that if something would happen, that this is X, Y, Z. This is how you as a consumer would deal with that. And I think now being let's say more than a year later, I think the airlines have become better. They have probably let's say automated some of their refund processes, has figured out some of the challenges that they were unknown to in the beginning, and they have now learned about it the hard way, unfortunately. So I think consumer expectations have probably changed, and they know now that it's not going to be completely like frictionless because there's still a pandemic going on, and I think the suppliers to a certain degree have also found like steady ground where they can now have better processes in place to deal with it. It was there were a lot of processes that I always say that were not really broken, so there was no reason to fix them. I think the pandemic reversed a lot of stuff and broke a lot of stuff, and I think that hopefully in a couple of years' time we'll say like, oh, we really made a jump, to better technology, better processes, better integrations. Due to this, it was very. There was a lot of hardship. It was very emotionally. It was very difficult, but at least we took a couple steps back and we fixed a lot of problems, and now for years to come we'll be good.
Yeah, totally agree with that. There was a motivating factor there, and it was driven by the economic reality of this pandemic. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about alternative payment methods, and this actually may tie in with what we just talked about. So, consumer behavior change. We've kind of established that, right? There were a lot of behaviors beforehand by both the industry as well as consumers that were, I think, pretty well accepted. Now we have a different ballgame, right? So now, interestingly enough, along the sort of topic of airline or travel provider risk, along comes a new type of paying for, say a very expensive vacation or travel abroad kind of thing, right? So I'm talking about sort of the buy now, pay later concept, right? Klarna is a good example of that. I think Affirm. We were even talking yesterday about this company, Fly Now, Pay Later, right? So
what's in the name? Huh?
Yeah. So it's a great name, I think. But the question is, what do we see in the industry? Doesn't that shift liability from the travel provider themselves to these new forms of payment in many respects? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think that the trend was already visible before the pandemic. I think the pandemic really put a lot of pressure, stress on cash flow and on people's access to cash or credit. And so where maybe before the pandemic, it was more common just to pay the full amount up front directly from your bank account or from your charge card. And I put, especially for younger people, 20, 30, 35 range, it would put, okay, yes, you would like to travel domestically, I guess, in most cases, but I would like to, given my financial situation, I'd like to spread my payment so that it's not going to hit my account, on day one. So that was already underway, and I think that was definitely also again accelerated by the pandemic. Interesting development. It differs quite a lot, by the way. If you look at from which side of the big pond, I think in the US is definitely different perspective than here in Europe. Here in Europe, if you would book with a tour operator, you already pay probably 30% of the total sum, within 2 weeks, and the remainder 6 weeks before departure, you would pay then. So you would already have kind of a spread there. But also bear in mind that in most let's say debit markets. So I would say the regions here in Europe where you first earn your money, then you spend it, right? That's where you would, if you would own a card, it would typically be a charge card, meaning that it would be automatically billed, and deducted from your account at the end of the month. So you don't really, and you don't pay any extra interest. It's not like you spread it already. But in other markets, like in the UK and France and Spain and Portugal, I think it's more common to have still revolving credit. So of course, there's a price tag to that as well for the consumer. So that's where I think these new entrants, these fintech companies, try to find like a middle ground where they can make it from an airline or travel provider perspective more like business usual, because they get an instant confirmation and they get the funds into their account within a couple of days. So it would be a usual situation with a card acquirer normally. But the consumer then basically is interacting with the BNPL provider and agrees on a plan. It could be the whole amount in 2 weeks. It could be spread over 3 months, 6 months, depending on, I guess, the booking as well. Right. It's not very common, I think, to pay after. It's a perishable good, right? Travel. I mean, once you've done it, it's gone, right? So I don't think it's a very good thing to do to have like a 36-month plan and you travel the next month, because then I think the incentive to pay the remainder, not for everyone, of course, but a subset will probably be less incentivized to pay the remaining installments. So yes, that's definitely. I think that what I always find an interesting aspect of it is that in a lot of cases, especially with airlines, not so much with like the packaging companies or the vacation companies, but is that in the end, not to disrupt the airline process, actually on the fly, a virtual card is inserted in the booking, so that from an airline perspective, it's an authorization, it's a settlement, it's a standard process. It just goes with the regular card flow.
Correct.
And then in a lot of cases, also the consumer then pays the BNPL provider also with a card. So in a way, it's kind of a middleware, kind of a wrapper around cards on both sides, but it fits the purpose, because now in the end, the consumer is more willing, to make a booking or maybe for a higher amount if they can spread the amount over time.
Yeah, I think again the risk is shifted. To be honest with you, the credit risk is shifted from the provider to in the event of something breaks, right? Some problem happens, they get a chargeback, right? Now the credit authorization goes through this other company, so that literally the consumer is applying for credit. And they may pay 0% interest, but they also may pay 29% interest, just like they do on their card. So really, it's a very unique process of taking potential liability away from the travel provider and actually consuming that on behalf of the BNPL provider. So it's a great thing, I think, in many respects for the industry, to be honest with you. Now, similarly, you mentioned sort of direct debit, right? So, which is very much a Europe kind of a thing, right? We have debit cards here, but it's a little bit different there. Tell me about Ideal, a kind of a form of payment in your home country of the Netherlands. It's based on the SEPA sort of workflow. What do you see there? How does that those types of payment options, how do they come into play with travel providers? And do they like them? Do they not like them? What's the feeling around those types of things?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I think there's especially now, after the pandemic, there's a couple of new elements that play a role there as well. But I think Ideal started basically already in 2005, and I think it originated more in the Nordics. I always said, it's so cold there in the winter, probably close to where you live as well, that people didn't want to go out, to make a payment. They just wanted to do their banking from home, right? Online banking.
Right.
That's where it started. So, and bear in mind that the Nordics, Finland, Switzerland, Denmark, Norway, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Netherlands, Belgium. Not heavily. There's not a lot of penetration from cards. People, like I said before, they want to earn their money first before they spend it. So it's money in your account, which you basically make available real time to transfer from your account to the merchant account. And basically, it's at the time of booking. You select if it's Ideal. There are others as well in other countries and overlapping structures as well. But is that you select your bank and basically you're redirected to your familiar online banking account where you log in with whatever authentication mechanism that you're used to, because you use it every day for other purposes as well, to pay the rent and stuff like that. And then with your redirect, your transaction details are actually included, the amount and the beneficiary. And the only thing you can do basically is select an account that you would like to use for it, if you have multiple, and then approve it. And then, of course, there's a check if there's sufficient money in that particular account to move the full amount to the merchant account. The good thing is it's basically a push from my account to the merchant account. So it's not a pool which you can dispute, because you've done it yourself, you authenticate yourself, and you moved it, so you were fully aware of it. And in case of Ideal, but it differs a little bit per scheme. It's a small fixed amount, which is basically transferred either instantly or the next day into your account. So that's all very positive from a merchant perspective.
Right.
I think and especially in the countries I mentioned, you really need it to convince people to move online, to book with you online. Because again, it's not like in certain countries. I remember like UAE, I think, where the average citizen has like 8 or 10 cards, because there are a lot of incentives there to use your card. Not so much here. So you use your bank account, you've earned it first, and then you pay for it. I think what's the most probably what happened since is that since also PSD2 and under the whole SEPA, that there are now the banks have to open up to APIs by third parties, so that it's easier to redirect the customer and to pull the money basically from the account with permission of the account holder. And that's where a lot of discussions or a lot of traction in the market now is, and a lot of funding goes to open banking. But it's pretty much the same thing. You pay from your bank account, from your current account, and it's moved instantly to either an intermediary or to the merchant. The key thing now, I think, is that some providers get a little bit enthusiastic about it, and they say, "Oh, this is going to be a credit card killer." Be aware. Visa, Mastercard, American Express. We're going to come after you. And I think, especially in travel, I think you then look at it too much from the merchant perspective, and what's the incentive for the customer, for the cardholder, to switch away from using sometimes a co-branded, with the airline credit card, with miles, with insurance, with delayed payment, with a protection against non-delivery of service, and what's in it for me if I then move to open banking? What's actually, money leaves my account right away. I have no protection. I have no perks. I have no miles, or whatever. So I think there's still a lot of things to be done. And the interesting thing is that currently it's very cheap because it's bare bone. But if you start adding these components to it, also the cost will go up. So pretty much you have then a pretty apples versus apples comparison. Now it's apples versus oranges.
Yeah. So I think, again, the risk is shifted back to the consumer, right? Because they don't have the chargeback, the dispute rights, right? They don't have a very defined set of rules within the context of these sort of open banking, European, but it's not just Europe. I mean, it's happening all over the world now.
It's a global,
US, etc. It's a global approach. So the travel providers benefit, right? But it does introduce new risk to the consumers.
It's all about adoption. If in the end
totally.
they can't convince the customer to use it, then no, it's all theory, right?
It's all theory at this point. Let's talk a little bit, just really quickly, because we're coming up. We got about 15, 16 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about regional. We've talked to Europe, right? So we've kind of discussed the idea of the SEPA approach to the Nordic approach, maybe is a better way of putting it, to paying for everything, but travel in particular. What's happening in Asia? We have a lot of wallets. You've got WeChat, Alipay. I mean, there's just I was doing a little bit of research on it last night. There's just a list of alternative payment methods. And what are we seeing in terms of travel in Asia right now, paying for travel specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and probably if we go back again to what the impact was of the pandemic on customer behavior in general when it comes to payments. And I think in China it was already underway, right? Where even the beggar on the street, the local farmer that's selling its produce on the market on the street, they already had a QR code, so that no one's carrying cash anymore, right? So you use your phone to pay with Alipay or WeChat Pay or Union Pay. So I think that they were already ahead of the curve there. So I think what we can learn from that is that, sometimes called refer to as super apps, that where they bring kind of a whole ecosystem together. You can get your car to pick you up, you can pay for your groceries, you can date, you can do whatever you like online within this ecosystem, and payment is an important part of that. And
absolutely.
And so I recently was hosting a session, and there was someone from CTO from AirAsia, and they have their AirAsia app, and it's the airline becoming the ultimate retailer by offering all these services, from food delivery to ride hailing to dating, whatever. I mean, and by the way, we also have seats on a plane. So it's shifting away from let's say, flying is our core business. We do a couple of things on the side we do a lot of stuff. By the way, we also run an airline. So yeah, that's interesting.
It's so true, right? I mean, I know that many of the international carriers have marketplaces, right? There's so much happening in that arena of we sell wine, and we, like you said, you can get your car here. You can call your car after you get off your plane, and it's really becoming a seamless experience. I think that's the approach that everyone is taking, which brings me to the next topic, which is, even before the pandemic, there were a lot of I will call them innovations, right, that were being hatched by the industry that I think were very, very positive. The new distribution capability, right, which is NDC, travel and payments. We got to have our acronyms, right? So you had NDC, and that's happening, right? And I know with IATA, for example, the whole concept of airlines and retailing, right, sort of taking in the bigger picture of this. We're not just selling seats on an airplane. We're actually providing an experience, right? Now, I have a very specific question on this. If you're talking about NDC, you're talking about airlines and retailing, you're talking about the Open Payments Alliance with HEDNA for hotels. The payment experience has become kind of I want to say the crown jewel of the travel industry. They realize this is an important piece. It's not just the journey they take in the plane and on the bus and the this and the that. It's actually the customer journey that they take with payments. Talk to me about that. Were these initiatives, or have they been validated or invalidated within the context of the post-pandemic world?
Yeah, I mean, I think NDC is a very good example, and recently organized an event on this topic, and mainly because I thought it was overdue that initially it was not considered payments, and I guess to get the distribution part, the sales part out of the way first, and then worry about the payments part. And I mean, in all fairness, even if probably it would have been considered early on, then with all the regulation changes, with the impact of the pandemic, it would have been a long and winding road or a steep learning curve as well, because it's doing it right. And retailing is one, but in the end, you see the tip of the iceberg. A lot of things have to happen underwater about paying the individual suppliers, the risk, the fraud management, the chargebacks. I think a lot of it is just not in plain sight. And if you want to become a retailer yourself, then you also have to take care of all these aspects to do it right. And a lot of it's, if it's payment side, compliance, security, there's a lot of things to consider, which if you're not involved directly, or maybe you get a commission because you do a redirect, then you don't have to worry about it. If you bring it all on board, yes, you have the ownership, you have the control, you have the commercial messaging, etc. But you still have to also deal with all the aspects that come with payments, the cost, the fraud, the risk, etc. So I think that's where we're trying to, I think in the travel industry, we're always a little bit behind with payments, which is okay. But I think it's worthwhile to make sure that we stay close to it at least, and not like with NDC that we're 6 years behind the curve, right? So that's where we do the whole retrofitting part, the whole catching up part. And that's where I think the pandemic will help in a way to accelerate NDC, because I think there's a need for recovery. There's an opportunity, a window to create change. But then we also make sure that we zip in, that we make sure that the payments also work, because currently it's still pretty static and legacy, and most of the payments are still done over the traditional rails, whilst NDC initially was the idea, now we're going to create a complete new bilateral relationship between the airline and travel agency. But in the end, I think the parts of the organizations on both sides were not really ready for that yet, and we're still working on figuring that out.
I think that's so true. And what I love about innovation is that the version 1.0, right, is always the most difficult to sort of bring to fruition, right? But it also, once you do it, everybody celebrates, no question about that. But it also highlights the issues within that particular thing.
There's always room for improvement. Yeah.
Always room. And so now you got to get 1.1, 1.2, and then you go on to the 2.0 and all that.
But we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. And my view of it is that these are very good for the industry, because, again, it goes back to focusing in on the customer journey, right? And I'm still a little bit, frankly, confused about the full capabilities of NDC. So if I say something here that's wrong, but my understanding is, let's unify the experience for the passenger, for the traveler, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Let's unify this so that we don't have all these different, experiences. And I think this is going to be ultimately, when it finally kind of evolves into what it's supposed to be, will be a great thing for passengers. And what's good for the passengers and the travelers is ultimately good for the providers as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. And actually, yesterday I stumbled upon a use case where I was speaking to a large European travel agency about this, and where the booking is made with NDC, you're currently restricted in the forms of payment, but typically, the travel agency would step in and they would take a payment from the consumer, and then they would put in a B2B payment basically to pay the airline. But it could well be that you mentioned Ideal, that I have paid with Ideal to the travel agency, and the travel agency has paid with a virtual card to the airline, and then I actually go online to manage my booking or to check in on what will I pay for, an upgrade for an extra bag. Then all of a sudden that airline, that US airline that you were talking about, doesn't offer Ideal or doesn't offer my currency. Right. So I think that's where still, but the airline also doesn't want to give the manage my booking or the intent check-in to travel agency, because they lose control and marketing opportunities. So I think there's still some things to work out there, that yes, you can completely streamline the process, but it also comes at a price. The price being that you have to then let go of the ownership of the customer. That's always a very sensitive topic.
It's very sensitive, and of course, travel. For those who don't know the travel ecosystem, it's very complex, and there's a lot of walls that are thrown up between online travel agencies and airlines, travel providers, all this kind of stuff. So, okay, we just have a few minutes left. This really, I think, kind of comes down to an interesting development that we've seen in the last few years, pre-pandemic also, but many of the sort of legacy, I'll call them legacy players, but they're really innovating as a result of understanding that they needed to get in the game. Many of these providers. So let's just say a GDS gets into the payments, space. They've enabled a payments approach, right? IATA, which is a great industry organization, has created the IATA Financial Gateway, and they're going to begin, that payment orchestration piece. I just see a lot of this happening. What is your view of this, and how do you see that fitting into the post-pandemic world, and really the recovery and the thriving of the travel industry?
Yeah, I think that was already underway for quite a while. If you go back to the early days of e-commerce and pre-e-commerce, it was completely disconnected, payments from booking, from distribution. With direct sales, all of a sudden, the airline was made responsible for authorizing a payment and for collecting a payment. Initially, the GDSs led that to the airlines or to their partners, but they also realized that that the whole value chain is moving up and down and sideways, and that they're trying to grow basically the presence and monetize certain of the aspects that have become more important over time. And payments is definitely one of them. It's more like core business now, also for the PSSs and other travel technology providers. Some of them are not yet really aware of it, but that will come as well. For instance, with NDC. But so yes, that you see that they move basically down the chain. You see that where initially what we now call a traditional gateway would play that role. Well, they have basically absorbed that part and have become the gateway themselves. Some of them are bringing on, like if it's like DCC and MCP or fraud screening and even to the extent of acquiring. So payments has become basically a complete playing field where you can play whatever role you like. Also with legislations and regulations in Europe, for instance, under PSD2, you can become your own payment institution if you want as a merchant, and you can do everything yourself. It's a choice, but you see that acquirers have introduced gateways. Gateways have become acquirers. Gateways have become payment orchestration providers. The whole full stack approach that you can offer, basically the whole package, including issuing and acquiring and chargeback handling and everything. It's looking at the investments flowing into this industry and on the payment side. There's a lot of interest in it, and to expand into it. Not all with the same amount of success. Not everyone is as motivated to do it, but there's definitely a lot of movement up and down the chain. That's for sure.
Yeah. One final question. This is more of a question for Paul. How has your business, up in the air, and I know you have some other initiatives going on, how has your business been impacted, and how have you evolved in your practice? You're a fintech guy, right? You understand payments, right? But has it changed your business?
Oh yeah, definitely. And when borders closed, when flights were canceled, I think all of a sudden, what was for many years, a challenge to find the last 1% in conversion, or to reduce the cost with a couple of basis points, or to integrate that third wallet in Vietnam. That was all like, doesn't matter. It's all about survival. It's about business continuity. It's about credit risk management. It's about staying alive. And I think that made a lot of changes. And what I've been working on is really to support the ecosystem and to create to make it sustainable, to make sure that in the end there is sufficient supply from payment providers, from acquirers to meet the existing and future growing demand. And I think that's where to help the industry understand what the true risk is and what are the upsides and how to manage the downsides of working in the travel industry. Because for a lot of people and a lot of links in the chain, it's still a very risky and tricky business, because also they don't really understand the moving parts and what plays a role. So I think it's back to the drawing board, making sure that we have the right components in place to make it work, and maybe use this period as well for innovation, but also making sure that it's stabilized, it's robust, it has potential towards the future, and then build further from there. So it was all of us. We went into reverse, we went a couple of steps back, and we stepped in to fix it, and hopefully we'll come out stronger than we went in before.
That's great. It's been great to journey with you through the past, 18, 20 months, whatever it's been. And, you and I have been on a lot of panels, and in summation, I just want to say that I think in general, that there have been really good things that have come out of the pandemic for the travel industry, right? I think a lot of the processes that we sort of took for granted, a lot of the people that we took for granted now we realize that these things are important and we need to pay attention to them. So I think there's a lot
closely together, and we're in it together. I think there was always
And without passengers, the industry is dead. Without travelers, without people to go on tours, blah, blah, blah. So for me, the future is bright. I'm very excited about what's coming, and the innovation that we see in the industry, even around disputes, is very heartening. So thank you, Paul, for joining us. You've been a great, great friend through this entire process. We appreciate you so much. And we look forward to more. Let's have another session down the road. So thanks a lot.
Hopefully face to face. Thank you very much for inviting me, and take care, Harlan.
Indeed. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.